Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest stories. It was supposed to be perfect, 15 years of marriage, celebrated with candlelight, vintage wine, and the gentle hum of old wedding tapes playing in the background. Olivia stood in the warm glow of their home, the scent of rosemary chicken in the air, her smile rehearsed, her heart uneasy. Ethan had gone all out, resurrecting memories from a time when laughter came easily. But nostalgia has a way of digging up more than joy. As the screen flickered, a younger Olivia appeared, radiant, laughing, untouchable. Then, a shift. The footage panned to the reception, to a moment Olivia had buried so deep it felt like watching someone else, her hand on a waiter's chest, her lips pressed to his in a kiss that wasn't innocent. Silence fell. Ethan didn't yell. He simply stood, glass in hand, and let it slip from his fingers. The crash against the tile was deafening. That was the moment everything cracked, not with rage, but with realization. The illusion of a perfect marriage didn't explode, it quietly fractured, like porcelain under pressure. And in that moment, Olivia understood, betrayal isn't always fresh. Sometimes it's been waiting in the dark, patient and quiet, for the right tape to start playing. The strange thing about heartbreak is how silent it can be. After the tape stopped and the glass shattered, Ethan didn't say a word. He stepped over the shards like a ghost and disappeared down the hallway, leaving Olivia standing in the middle of a scene she no longer recognized. No accusation.
No slam doors.
Just a quiet so heavy it pressed against her ribs. In the days that followed, Ethan went through the motions, dinner, dishes, polite conversation, but something in him had folded inward. He didn't touch her shoulder in passing anymore. He didn't look her in the eyes for long. He was there, but not really. And that silence? It grew roots. Olivia began to feel like she was living with a shadow of the man she once knew. Their home, once warm and familiar, became a maze of unspoken things. She'd walk past him and wonder if he still loved her, or if he was just trying to remember how. The absence of confrontation felt worse than yelling. It felt like he was letting her slip through his fingers without a fight. And that was the most terrifying part, not the betrayal uncovered, but the sense that neither of them knew how to reach for each other anymore. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was restless. It was aching. It was loud in all the wrong ways. And in that hollow quiet, Olivia realized something gutting. Sometimes love doesn't die in screams. Sometimes, it just forgets how to speak. Guilt has a peculiar way of haunting you, not with thunderous regret, but with soft, relentless murmurs that echo through the quietest moments. Olivia tried to convince herself it was nothing, that the kiss with Jake had been a drunken lapse, a forgotten blip in the long timeline of their marriage. But guilt doesn't care about the calendar. It doesn't fade with anniversaries or get buried under good intentions. It lingers in the way she hesitated before meeting Ethan's eyes, in the sudden chill she felt when his hand brushed hers and didn't linger. She found herself scrubbing the kitchen counter too hard, checking the mirror too often, rehearsing lines in her head she'd never dare speak aloud. It was years ago. It didn't mean anything. I'm not that woman anymore. But deep down, she feared maybe she was. Or maybe she didn't know who she was at all. The unease became a rhythm, a pulse under her skin. Every time Ethan left a room without touching her, she felt it like a cut. Every silence was a judgment. And the worst part? He hadn't even condemned her. That made the guilt sharper. It left her nowhere to place her shame but on herself. She smiled through dinners, kissed him goodnight, played the part, but inside she was unraveling. And so in that vulnerable restlessness, she reached for something, someone else. Not out of lust. Not even out of rebellion. But because she needed to feel something real again. Even if it was wrong. It began with a message, innocent, almost forgettable. A man named Lucas had sent her a simple hello on a dating site she didn't even remember signing up for. Olivia stared at the screen longer than she should have, her finger hovering over delete. But something in her paused. He wasn't pushy. He was kind, funny, thoughtful. He asked questions Ethan hadn't asked in years. At first, she replied out of boredom, maybe curiosity. But soon, their conversations became her escape hatch. Late at night, after the dishes were done and the house had gone quiet, she'd curl up with her phone like it was a lifeline. Lucas told her she seemed intelligent, warm, lost. And somehow, that made her feel seen. Really seen. Not as a mother or a wife or the woman who kissed someone else on a wedding tape, but as Olivia. A person with doubts, dreams, and an aching loneliness she'd never said aloud. The more she typed, the freer she felt. The guilt of it hovered, yes, but it was quieter than the emptiness she carried at home. She lied once, early on. Told Lucas she was a widow. The words had slipped out before she could stop them, and then it was too late. In some strange way, pretending Ethan was gone felt easier than admitting he was still there but unreachable. Olivia wasn't trying to fall in love. She was trying to remember what it felt like to matter. Even if it was to a stranger behind a screen. It shocked her how easily the lie came. "I'm a widow," Olivia typed, staring at the message before hitting send. Her heart pounded, not with guilt, but with something closer to relief. She didn't know why she said it. Ethan wasn't dead. He was just distant. Silent. A shape beside her in bed, not a partner. And somehow, in that single word, widow, she granted herself permission to speak freely, to exhale without consequence. With Lucas, there was no history to trip over, no expectations to meet. Just clean space to be whoever she wanted to be. And she wanted to be someone seen. Someone chosen.
The widow limait de invisible burden visible again.
She could grieve out loud, even if it wasn't real. But what unsettled her most wasn't the dishonesty, it was how honest she became inside that false frame. She told Lucas about her fears, her feeling of fading, her disconnection from the woman she used to be. And in those late-night exchanges, she wasn't seductive. She was raw. And for the first time in a long time, she felt understood. But the more she opened up, the more that lie weighed on her, because Olivia began to wonder if pretending Ethan was gone was her way of admitting she no longer knew how to reach him. That maybe part of her believed he had already emotionally vanished. And in this fragile, fabricated space, she felt both free and painfully tethered. Because pretending to be alone made her realize just how alone she truly was. She waited for him in a quiet bookstore cafe off Carson Street, heart pounding with equal parts dread and anticipation. Olivia hadn't dressed up, no makeup, no perfume, just a sweater and jeans, as if stripping herself of the performance might make the moment feel more real. She clutched her coffee cup like it could anchor her, scanning the door every time it chimed. Minutes turned into an hour. But Lucas never came. The ache in her chest spread slowly, shame curling through her like smoke. She had risked so much for this hope, this maybe, and now she was left sitting in a corner booth with nothing but her thoughts and a cup gone cold. That night, sleep was impossible. Her mind spun with questions. Had he changed his mind? Was it a cruel trick? Or worse, had she imagined the whole thing meant something? Then, a week later, Ethan sat her down, eyes shadowed with something unreadable. He confessed, he was Lucas. Every message. Every word. Every vulnerable confession she'd shared had gone not to a stranger, but to her husband. And he didn't accuse her, he just said it softly, like he was apologizing too. Olivia couldn't speak.
The floor tilted beneath à terre.
She had opened her heart to someone, not knowing it was the man she had grown distant from. It was like seeing him for the first time in years, only now it hurt. Because if he had to become someone else to hear her, what did that say about the silence between them? Ethan's confession didn't come with raised voices or slamming doors. It came with a quiet weight, like he'd been carrying it for days, unsure if speaking it aloud would break something or save it. "I was Lucas," he said, eyes not quite meeting hers. Just that. And in that moment, Olivia's breath caught, not from betrayal, but from the realization of how deeply he had been trying to find her. He hadn't catfished her out of cruelty. He had created Lucas out of desperation, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if he showed up as a stranger, she might let him in again. And she had. She had poured her heart out to this phantom, her fears, her loneliness, her aching disconnection, and it had all gone to him. Her husband. It should have felt like a violation. But instead, it felt like a mirror being held up to a life they had both stopped seeing clearly. Olivia cried, not because she had been caught, but because she realized they were both lost. Both lonely. Both trying to reach each other in a language they no longer knew how to speak. There was no shouting that night.
Nora itches anger.
Just two people sitting in the silence between what was and what might still be. The truth wasn't clean, but it was human. And in that fragile space, they didn't break further. They just paused. And for the first time in years, they noticed each other. And maybe that was where healing had to begin. Not in blame, but in recognition. Healing didn't come wrapped in epiphanies, it came in jagged pieces, through therapy sessions where neither Olivia nor Ethan knew what to say at first. Their counselor, soft-spoken and perceptive, became more like a guide through the emotional wreckage they'd spent years tiptoeing around. The silence that once suffocated them now had a voice. Olivia spoke of her fear of vanishing, of becoming just a name on a mailbox, a shadow in photos. Ethan, eyes low, admitted that he had long felt like a placeholder in his own marriage. Not because of Olivia's actions, but because of how small he had let himself become. He confessed to feeling boring, unworthy, forgettable. He hadn't reached for her, not out of anger, but because he was convinced she no longer saw him. These sessions weren't easy. There were tears that came uninvited and long pauses that ached. But there were also tiny sparks, moments of understanding that flickered like lights in a tunnel. Olivia kept a journal at the counselor's suggestion. Ethan did the same. And slowly, they began to exchange entries. Reading his thoughts felt like time travel, back to a version of him she hadn't known still existed. He had been hurting too. Not in loud, showy ways, but in quiet, everyday aches. And that realization shattered something in her. She wasn't the only one drowning. They both had been, just in different corners of the same room. And maybe the only way forward was to finally walk toward each other again, even if they had to limp. They hadn't been away in years, not really. So when Ethan suggested a weekend at the old lake house, his family's forgotten retreat tucked between pines and silence, Olivia agreed, not knowing what they were searching for. The air was misty, cold enough to pull jackets close, and the lake barely rippled, as if holding its breath. They didn't fill the space with chatter. Instead, they sat side by side on the dock, thermoses of tea warming their hands, hearts still brittle from too many almost conversations. The stillness pressed in, and finally, Olivia turned to him. "Why Lucas?" she asked. Ethan didn't look at her right away. He watched the ripples stretch across the water and said, "I missed you. But I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. I thought, maybe if I met you as a stranger, I'd get to know the woman you've become." Olivia's throat tightened. All this time, she thought she had been the only one changing, the only one aching. But here he was, reaching not in anger, but with curiosity. With hope. And in that moment, something inside her softened. She had been so focused on her loneliness, she hadn't seen his. They stayed there until the sky turned pink, neither needing to say much more. For the first time in what felt like forever, they didn't feel like strangers in the same house. They felt like two people learning each other again, gently, curiously, like hands reacquainting with a forgotten rhythm. And that felt like a beginning. It was almost an accident, the way Olivia found the box. She was digging through old Christmas decorations in the attic when she spotted it, a weathered wooden chest tucked behind faded wreaths and tangled lights. It wasn't labeled, just dust-covered and quiet, like it had been waiting. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each carefully dated, each in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting. Her breath caught. The first letter was from the year his father died. The next, from a night they'd argued about moving. Another, from a quiet Tuesday when he couldn't sleep and didn't want to wake her.
These weren't love letters.
They were lifelines. Private confessions he never sent, moments of longing, doubt, and devotion written when words failed him out loud. As she read, Olivia wept, not because they were sad, but because they were true. Ethan had been talking to her all along, just on paper. She had thought she was the only one holding the silence, but he had been filling it with ink and hope. One letter simply read, "I miss the way you looked at me before life got so loud." Her chest cracked open. That night, she wrote back, one letter. Raw, simple, honest.
You were never alone. I just forgot how to say it.
She placed it in the box and left it on the coffee table, no ceremony, no reveal. Just the quiet offering of a woman ready to listen again. And somewhere between those paper walls, their love began to whisper back. She didn't say a word about the letter, not that night, not the next morning. Olivia left the box on the coffee table like a soft invitation, hoping he'd open it, afraid he might not. But on the third morning, as sunlight spilled into the living room, she found a folded piece of paper beneath her coffee mug. It was Ethan's handwriting, unmistakable and trembling at the edges. Just a few lines. I read your words 100 times. I never thought I'd be lucky enough to hear them. Thank you for still choosing me. Her throat tightened, not with sadness, but with something more fragile, relief. Forgiveness wasn't grand or loud. It was this. A quiet back and forth. A willingness to keep talking. To keep showing up. That morning, the air between them felt different, not light, not heavy but alive. Like a breath that had been held too long finally released. Olivia didn't rush to hug him or kiss him or plan the next step. Instead, she sat beside him on the couch, their knees barely touching, and simply let the silence settle, comforting, not punishing. For once, silence didn't mean distance. It meant presence. That letter, those few lines, were more than words. They were proof that the thread between them hadn't snapped, it had just gone quiet. Now, it was humming again. Fragile but strong. Worn, but still holding. And in that moment, she didn't feel like she was clawing her way back to happiness. She felt like she had finally found her way home. There was no grand proposal, no sweeping gestures, just Ethan, one rainy afternoon, holding 2 mugs of tea and asking, "Would you want to write new vows?" Olivia blinked, heart skipping. He didn't mean a ceremony. He meant something real. Intimate. Just them. A few weeks later, they stood barefoot on their back porch, wrapped in sweaters, the chill air filled with the scent of damp earth and old memories. A Bluetooth speaker hummed softly, playing their 2008 playlist, songs that once danced through car rides and lazy Sunday mornings. They hadn't rehearsed. They didn't need to. Ethan went first. He didn't promise perfection or forever. He promised presence. To see her even when she tried to disappear. To listen even when words got messy. Olivia followed, her voice trembling. She promised not to perform anymore. Not to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. She promised to reach, even when pride got in the way. They laughed, they cried, they kissed, awkward, unpolished and perfect. There were no witnesses. No flower petals. Just 2 people who had broken each other's hearts and decided to stay anyway. In that quiet backyard, they didn't pretend to erase the past. They honored it, cracks and all. Because real love isn't about forgetting. It's about returning, again and again, even when it's hard. Especially then. As they held hands and watched the sky darken above them, Olivia felt something rare, not the rush of young love, but the steadiness of choosing. And this time, she chose with her whole heart. They didn't need to document their love for the world, so they documented it for themselves. One Sunday afternoon, Olivia found an old Polaroid camera tucked in a forgotten drawer. On a whim, she snapped a photo of Ethan stirring coffee, half asleep, hair a mess, and smile crooked. No filters.
No styling.
Just real life. And something about it felt sacred. They decided to take one photo every Sunday, no matter what. Rain or shine. Joy or tension. Laughing in the kitchen, crying on the couch, grocery shopping, doing nothing. Each image was a breadcrumb, marking the slow path they were rebuilding together. By the end of the year, the hallway was strung with tiny snapshots, clothespins clipped to twine, memories stitched into light. Olivia would sometimes stop mid-step just to look at them. Not to admire the aesthetics, but to remember that even the quiet moments mattered. Especially those. Somewhere around photo number 42, a blurry shot of them on a late-night drive, windows down, hair wild, Olivia realized she wasn't waiting to feel happy anymore. She was happy. Not in a perfect picture frame kind of way, but in a way that felt rooted. Real. They weren't chasing the high of what once was. They were building something new, raw, and deeply theirs. Each photo whispered the same quiet truth: healing isn't loud. It's in the small, repeated choice to stay. To see. To reach. And in those captured moments, Olivia saw proof, not of who they had been, but of who they were still becoming. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to lose sight of each other in the blur of work, screens, and daily routines. This story reminds us that love isn't sustained by grand gestures, it's built in the quiet, intentional moments. Don't wait for a crisis to ask your partner how they're really feeling. Talk, even when it's uncomfortable. Listen, even when it's hard. Write the letter. Take the photo. Sit in the silence together. Because sometimes the most powerful way to say I love you is simply to choose to stay, and to keep choosing, every single day.